What we'd like to move into now in our last bit of time is those additional firsthand experiences of being out there on the landscape and living and working on the central grasslands. And we've invited 4 speakers representing the different nations that are involved in this process to just share a little bit of their personal story and what's happening on their land and things that they're working on projects, and to really try to thinking about Jim's scale, to really take this down all the way to the ranch level and that immediacy, so we can get a sense of what's out there. Tammy, do you want to add anything to that intro before I bring up the first? Okay. So Miles, if you're ready, what I'll have each person do as we go in order here is just introduce yourself and share your story, and whatever thoughts and ideas you want to share. I know the different panelists have brought up some different resources or stories that they want to share. And so Miles, we'll go to you first, and if you're ready to go.
I guess I'm ready as I'm ever going to be. I don't have a whole bunch more to add. They pretty much covered everything I was going to talk about. But anyway, I'm at Fir Mountain, Saskatchewan in Canada, and we're kind of right in the geographical center of North America. Like, you can't get any more in the center than what we are. Like, we're about as far as you can get from anywhere, but we're close to everywhere, I guess. Anyway, like, our place consists of about 45,000 acres, and there's about a quarter of it's deeded, quarter of it's leased, and the other we lease or rent from Grasslands National Park through various agreements. And like, I guess I could start out with how I got involved with conservation. To start with, I was the president of the Saskatchewan Stockbird Association. They were having a meeting in Regina that was going to talk about conservation and various things on the prairie, and I didn't really have time to go, so our secretary went, and she phoned me out the first day and said, "You better get in here because things aren't right." And so when I get there, what they decided was that there shouldn't be any cows at all grazing on the prairie, and the mixed grass prairie and the short grass prairie, and that they were a very horrible thing to have out there. And so anyway, I took pretty good offense to that, and kind of tore the meeting apart, actually. So, and they said they were going to prove me wrong because I didn't think we were doing that bad a job out here. And so anyway, the fellow that did the research, he come back saying that at the worst it's a wash, that grazing would be a wash, if not better. And so anyway, with that, he said the only reason why we take cows off there is because we hate ranchers, and he didn't know enough of them to know if he hated us or not. So he gave us the benefit of the doubt. And with that, then I got involved with this Prairie Conservation Action Plan and starting redoing that. And we wrote it, and of course the first goal was to ensure that there was a good native prairie grazing regime maintained in the province of Saskatchewan. And for the most part, it's been kind of holding its own, and we've come a long ways with World Wildlife Fund Canada saying that grazing is an acceptable use of mixed grass prairie, and that was a good thing. So anyway, time goes on, and we've got a bird that's on our place. We're just there right north of the Montana border, and called the greater sage grouse, and it's been struggling for quite some time. And so anyway, they come to me to see if we could make life better for the ones that were left. And so we had prescriptions on how much grass we could take grazing, and we do these transects to make sure that we were meeting the prescriptions that they required to create the best habitat we could for these birds. And it wasn't an onerous task to get there. So, I mean, we did that for I think 2 years with the first one, and then in 2015, I don't know, that might even been before, it was before but in 2015, there was an order put in place because the courts decided that the government of Canada wasn't doing their due diligence. They were taking to court on these greater sage grouse, and that they were going to they would be extinct if something wasn't done very fast. So anyway, the judge said that, yeah, it's not right, so they gotta do something. So then they come and we did another agreement with Canadian Wildlife Service, or ECCC, and they give us some funding, and we hired some people, and we moved cows around, and we rented this land from the park that I talked about previous, and it was been ungrazed for anywhere from 15 to probably 30 years. So it was kind of overgrown grassland. It hadn't been burnt, hadn't been grazed, and there was pretty much no forbs left growing there, or not little ones anyway, that sage grouse like to eat. So part of the deal was to manage this. And as we did that, the people that were working for me they had these either Android cell phones, or and they kept track of these other endangered species that they've seen while they were going around. And one of the comments they come back with is that there's got to be something wrong, because all we see are endangered species. And then when you look back at what Harvard was saying about the birds that they've got in the Chihuahuan desert, they're the same birds we have here, and they're in short supply, but they breed well under the management that we do here. So that's a good thing, I guess. And what else do we have? Like I said, you guys did a really good job saying a lot better. Oh, when folks are dealing with landowners, the thing you have to do is maybe you have to do like they did with me and upset me. So I was said that, okay, I don't think I'm as bad a guy as you think I am, and that I don't think we do as bad a job out there as you think we do, and I'm going to prove you wrong. Or after that happens, then like the carrot and the stick deal. Like, I mean, don't keep taking things away from us, like our ability to manage our places, and think that you're going to do us a favor and create friends. Maybe it's better to say, okay, this is what we're trying to get done. Is there something that you could do on your place to make it better for us? And this is what this particular bird or animal needs. How can you, with your management, make that better? And through the discussion, it's amazing what you'll come up with when you're dealing with farmers, because that's what we do, is we grow things. And especially livestock people, because we do kind of understand animals. And yeah, that's one more. Oh, another thing that we talked about was the scale. And it's really important. Like when we get down to the thing, because I don't think we go small enough. And when we were talking about centimeters, I said, okay, we got a guy that knows what's going on here now, because we're talking, because I think it's insects and the food that these birds and various things eat that travel back and forth. And a lot of times the insects get left out because, oh, they're just there. I mean, they're mosquitoes, you swat them. I just killed some flies in the windows. I mean, that's the way it is. But the birds outside are running into the window trying to get them. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm good to be done.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you everybody for the invitation. We are in Chihuahua, Mexico, we're ranchers there. I joined the ranching operation 15 years ago. Let's go to the next one. We are actually nested right in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert in Chihuahua, Mexico. Next one, please. That's the ranch we own, 30,000 acres. As you can see, we have all kinds of terrain, hills and mountain range and flat grasslands. Next one, please. So a little bit of information about the ranch. Just keep going. We run just a cow-calf operation. We have very low precipitation. Our average is supposed to be 10 inches, but we have only 8 on the last 3 years. We don't use any kind of inputs. In order for us to restore our place, we have not been using any chemical or mechanical or seeding. And what we do is actually doing holistic management or rational grazing, whatever you want to call it. And we are part of a network that encompasses more than 500,000 acres in the state of Chihuahua mostly. Next, please. So the rainfall actually mostly fall in 3 months, July, August, and September. So the idea here is for us to be an independent ranch, we have to stockpile the grasses for 9 months, to live on the grass for 9 months, and then to grow enough grass on those 3 months that we got the rains. Next one, please. So I took this picture about 2 weeks ago on a neighboring ranch nearby my ranch, and you can see the typical situation in the Chihuahuan Desert, people feeding the cows. Now think about for a moment that it's not only what we destroy within our land, but that we are promoting the opening of more farming land around us as we bring the feed to our cows. Next one, please. So we know that total rest is not really good for grasslands. Grasslands need to be managed with animals, with grazing animals. It's not as a humid or more humid environment. Next one, please. So we have tried mechanical work, but we don't really like much the result, like this one. Next one, please. So we try to minimize the disturbance of the soil. Now we know that there's a lot of places where we're fighting with the woody plants, but as you can see here in my ranch, we actually work for what we want, and we just forget about the woody plants, and that's kind of the results that we have got there. Next one, please. Right. So just to take you a little bit to a tour to the ranch, imagine that you're driving 40 miles and then you get into my neighbor's ranch, and we already have 6 inches of rain in summer, and that's how the ranch looks like last year. Next one. Now you jump into my ranch on the same day, and that's a result of proper management with the same amount of rainfall. Next one, sir, please. Now we're back again in the spring of last year. Again, we took that road again. Then we, on the upper left, is a continuous grazing on a communal land or ejido. And then the next one on the upper right is my neighbor with rotational grazing. When I say rotational grazing, I mean a few cows on large paddocks. And the bottom one is my ranch. All of those pictures taken on the same day. So it makes a big difference. Next one, please. Now, on spring last year, on my neighbor on the south fence line, mine is on the green side. My neighbor is on the farther side. So you can see the difference that really management does in order to get effective rainfall. Next one. Same spot, right side, my ranch, left side, my neighbor's ranch. Now for us ranchers, one of the nice things about it is that we can run 3 times more cattle on the same acreage, and even though we can grow more grass. Next one, please, sir. I like this picture. It was actually taken on the same day. My neighbor's ranch on the left, my ranch on the right. So you can see how much of a difference the properly cows can do in the desert. Same rainfall, yeah. Now a closer look at the Tobosa grass, which is a species that we have in the Chihuahuan desert. That picture, again, winter, same grass species, left side or ranch and right side or neighbor's ranch. See the difference? Just think about it all, what it does with the wildlife and life in general. Next one. So closer look on both grasses. Left one, my neighbor, right, my ranch. You can see the quality of the grass. So we should really not only talking about the cover or the amount of grass, but also the quality of the grass that we're producing for all the living organisms. Next one. Now, last year was a challenging year in the Chihuahuan Desert because we have very late rains. Instead of getting the rains in the monsoon, we got the rains in September and October. And this is the result of our ranch before during the summer. So you can see a lot of recovery took place even though we got late rains. Next one. Yeah. So we believe that because we deal with nature, nature is always in constant movement, and whatever you're doing, you're going forward and backwards, but it will depend on your understanding and management. Now we are strong believers of the cows and the power of the manure. See in this particular slide how we're promoting new grass, new seedlings coming up on that microclimate, which is cow pie. Next one. So obviously we don't really put any chemicals in our cows because then we're gonna be end up killing these great workers, which are the dung beetles. Next one. So this is the work of the dung beetles on a side view. See how they fertilize the soil, it's just pretty amazing. Next one. Talking about the water cycle, the infiltration. These two spots, the lower corner is my ranch, the upper corner is a neighboring ranch. And we are able to infiltrate, thanks to management, 18 inches of rain per hour. On the upper left, we were able to infiltrate only 2 inches. That means that we can infiltrate, if we were able to do so on the whole 30,000 acres, we would be able to provide the water needs of 100,000 people for a full year. So we're not only talking about the grasslands, but the water capacity. Next one, please. So for us as ranchers and also in general, we need to work, next one please, on the genetics. So we really need animals that can thrive on the resources that the ranch is providing without having to bring anything from the outside. See, you can see examples of cows adapted to their environments. Next one, please. This is a my ranch where they pretty much ate all the cactus prickly pear. We don't even burn these pines. I hope there's nobody here from PETA, but well, you know, trying to get the cows adapted. Next one. So the thing is that people are very willing to do it once when they see a benefit on it. Next one. For example, in our case, on the Sierra part of the ranch, on the mountain range, this is how we do it, how we fence it, how we work certain spots. Next one. See the willingness of people to even use this temporal electric fence on a pretty rocky slope, even using these yuccas as posts. Next one, please. Now we know, we understand that 100% of the rainfall, 60% comes from the sea and 40% we are responsible for that other 40%. So next one, please. So what we have seen, where you see that mark is where the ranch is located. What we have seen in the last 2-3 years is a little bit more rain at the ranch. Does that mean that we're pulling more rains because we're extending the green season? I do believe so. Next one. I mean, I'm not saying that only it rains in my ranch, but it's a thing that we're seeing lately, that we're getting a little bit more rain. Next one, please. So from our experience, we like conservation organizations to work on ranchers that already are committed to somehow or on their way. We like to work in sync with nature, and we like to put some focus on our investments on the most productive areas and try to build corridors, which I think you do. We don't fight nature with toxics. We don't promote total waste, and we try not to disturb the soil with mechanical work. Next one, please. So we can see a lot of wildlife at the ranch. So the wildlife is increasing for all the animals under the ground, above the ground, and on the air. Next one, please. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. I just want to say thank you to everybody, to Matt and Tammy and everybody for inviting the Indigenous voice and weaving us in all of the presentations. It's sometimes I think I have to be careful what I ask for. I really wanted the Indigenous voice in there and that perspective, and I think that we're capturing it. So again, thank you for doing that. As said earlier, I'm Monica Terkildsen. I work with the World Wildlife Fund, and I work out of Pine Ridge Reservation here in southwestern South Dakota. So I've been able to do some work with conservation and really enjoy it. But one of the things I wanted to share, did you find it, Matt?
Yep, it's coming up now. Sorry about that. I had your land acknowledgement one up as well. So here we go. All right, thanks everybody.
Okay, so I wanted to share this. This is tribal land ownership from an Oglala tribal member perspective, and that would be me. I don't think that I can share the story of any other tribal members and their perspective. So I made sure that I emphasize that this is my perspective and from this area. But I think that there is a lot of commonalities with tribes across the regions that we're talking about. And so I thought that it would be really important when we talked about the question, what does successful grassland conservation look like for me? I thought I would share a little bit of information and background initially so that we can really talk about that question. So can you go to the next one? I gotta move myself, I can't. I just wanted to share just a little bit of background. So after the Treaty of 1851 was created, you see this map on the side here. This was a huge area. I think it was 70 million acres was given to tribal members. And I hate saying given, but this was the area that tribals, all the tribes and the ones that we talked about, done a roll call with, had this area. And this was the original areas of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, and Crow, and there was just a lot of them. So this is the 1851 treaty that shows the land that after that treaty that we had to utilize. And the other concept, can you just go back one more? Go back to that real quick. One of the things that was really hard for us as Indigenous people to understand, and is still really hard to understand, is that one cannot own their own grandmother. When individuals talked about land ownership, and it's showing itself in its complications today, but we really don't have the concept of being able to put up a fence and say that this 60 acres is mine, because we really don't have that concept of land ownership as a European American would. So, okay, go to the next. I wanted to share, this is our World Wildlife Fund's map of the Great Plains, but what it does is it shows all of the current reservations that are in place in the Great Plains area that we we work in. But I wanted to share that the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887 is what created it from that first map that I shared with the 1851 treaty. Then we had a Dawes Allotment Act that created the reservations as you see them today. So the land base shrunk from that 70 million to roughly, I think it's 10 million acres with all of these 16 tribes in this area. In that Dawes Allotment Act, what it did is it provided to each head of family 1/4 of a section, to each single person over 18 years of age 1/8 of a section, to each orphan child under 18 years of age 1/8 of a section, and to each other single person under 18 years now living, or who may be born prior to the date of the order of the president directing allotment of the lands 1/16 of a section. So that's, I think that's 40 acres. So, you know, that's what individuals, so they took that whole piece, they done these allotments, they shrunk them down to these reservations, and then they gave individuals allotments, and then that's what we were given. 1/8 of a section, 1/4 of a section, you know, so it just, and that's what we were supposed to go forward to. And then they opened up that piece to the Homestead Act. So that shrunk our land bases down even more. Go to the next one. This map here, it's real hard to see, but it's an original allotment map. And what that is every square there you see, it has a name on it. So they just went through and they said, okay, Monica, this is yours and you're entitled to 80 acres and we're gonna put you out in the Badlands out there, and you go forth, be prosperous and live that way. And so, because we didn't understand land ownership that way. We didn't have wills, we didn't write wills, and we really weren't able to live on those pieces of land in a lot of cases too. So what happened is, if I got that 80 acres originally, I would have children and then they would inherit it. And because I wouldn't write a will, let's say I had 4 children, then that 80 acres is now owned by 4 children without any separation or anything. And then another generation. So what it has led to was this really intense fractionation on Indian lands. So that original 80-acre allotment that I may have received back in the day could have over 100 heirs on it. And nobody really knows who owns what piece, or you can't. And so what we get, instead of a title, what we see when we go into the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who manages that as a trust responsibility, what we get is a TSR, we call it. It's a title status report. So when I look at that title status report, we look at Monica Terkildsen. She owns this land of section 1158, or tract 1158. And on that, it'll say that I own 0.0001%. So that's how we track the land, is through title status reports, and that fractionation has become a really huge issue. And what that's led to was the economic status on Pine Ridge Reservation. What they did, the Bureau of Indian Affairs created range units. And range units are comprised of allotted individual land, tribal land, and can be fee land. So fee land is land that was taken out of trust. So these range units are set up and designed to hold X number of cattle or livestock. So they drew a range unit around an area of land, and they say, okay, this range unit runs, you can run 200 head of livestock on here for 6 months. So then they take that, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs manages all of that land. And that's really the economic status for Pine Ridge Reservation, is the range units. And what it's led to for us as individual landowners is we've really lost control of our individual land. So if I wanted to build a house on my land that I know I own 0.0001% of that 80 acres, it's nearly impossible, because then we have to get signatures from all of the other heirs, and that could also be a tribe that owns part of that land, because a tribal member can sell to the tribe. So we've really lost control of our individual land. And I think that what it has also led to is, if you come to Pine Ridge today, there is absolutely no conservation area on Pine Ridge at all. So I think that's what it's led to, and I think that it becomes important to understand this. And even though we're a reservation of 2.7 million acres, we really don't have any conservation, and we feel like we don't have any control over our own land. Next. So I wanted to answer that question. Conservation to me looks like taking communally owned land and creating a conservation area. And this is the work I'm doing right now with World Wildlife Fund. So we have this huge area that is part of a national park, but it's all tribally owned land, and it's 133,000 acres. And there's range units that were created on that, but it's all communally owned land, meaning it belongs to all of us as tribal members. And I believe that this is one of the ways that we on a reservation can really look at creating conservation areas. And I think that it's also another way that we can look at it is, we have to look at competing for land. That means that we would have to, if we have an operator leasing a range unit, that would be a great conservation area if that's something we wanted to look at. Then we would have to compete with our tribal and non-tribal livestock owners. We'd have to pay a lease, and then we'd create a conservation area. It's a possibility, but then we look at competing for land in that scenario. Next. Greatest concerns and what works. Some of the concerns I have as a tribal member is we elect a tribal council and we elect a president and a vice president here on Pine Ridge. And right now, I think that the concern is that elected officials aren't knowledgeable regarding grassland conservation. And I think one of the really important things, and I always try to talk about it, is our traditional medicinal plants that grow here. And I think that that lack of knowledge of conservation in general is a big concern. Another concern I have is tribes not included in this discussion and resources, including knowledge of current systems not shared with tribes. You know, we're looking at promoting the Recovering America's Wildlife Act right now. Tribes weren't included in that prior, and states were. And that's another big concern, is the lack of unstable governments, because we elect every 2 years, but also it affects our funding cycles. So we're not able to project projects forward for X number of years because we don't have the right kind of funding to do that. I gotta move my picture again. That's all I see. Another concern is, like I said earlier, we're having to compete amongst ourselves for land. So those are some of the concerns I think that I would reflect in looking at conservation. But that's not all. There's some successes. And I have seen Sean Grassel with the Laura Brusso tribe. He is a tribal program, and he has acquired some leases, and he's done some CRP programming and has created some conservation areas. So there's some successes there that have happened. And I think that points to partnerships and collaborations are really important, and they help bring in that information. And as I listened to Chief talk, you know, he pointed that out, and I think that's really right, but I think that it's got to be brought into Indian country, and we really need to figure out how to work with those. Another success, individual tribal members pushing local legislation. I think this is really important. It's something that we're trying to do we established a working group. We're moving forward. We're trying to do a declaration of priorities from a survey that was done, but pushing local legislation to create conservation areas, and especially preservation of our medicinal plants, I think is going to be really important. Especially this time with COVID, I think that has made that really apparent. And I think that what that is reclaiming lifeways. A lot of people use the word culture, but we call it lifeways. Reclaiming lifeways and putting those into practice. So if we establish a conservation area, we're really reclaiming a lifeway, and we can continue to use those medicinal plants far into the future. And I think that's something that, and we're talking about roadmaps that need to be considered. You know, those are really important issues for us as Indigenous people. Next. And I guess that's it. That's all that I had there. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I really enjoyed providing information. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt. So yeah, my name is Bill Melton. I ranch in central Montana, and I'm quite honored to be part of this panel and the program today. I'm just somewhat awed by the efforts people are making to try and make things work. I guess a little bit about my history is my father bought a place, Montana, in '56, and I'm now on a different place and I've been here for over 42 years. And actually, a lot of the practices we apply on our ranch to improve grasslands and habitat are, you know, in many respects akin to what Alejandro shared. And I just tip my hat to that gentleman for the incredible work he's doing down there. And I'd actually, with the time I have and the patience for people to stay on, I'd like to spend less time about the conservation work we're doing on our individual ranch, which I think has been significant, but I've learned early on that I could have the most successful ranch in the world, but if my neighbors are failing, I will fail. That my success and resilience is dependent on the resilience of the community I live in and the communities that surround those communities. So in recent years, you know, I do a lot of collaborative work. I facilitate with a lot of groups here in central Montana. And what we're learning is there's an opportunity of how we approach these issues in terms of, I guess there's two questions that I was just, as I've been listening, I keep changing what I want to share, but I think two of the most important questions that I've been trying to respond to is, how do we leverage our shared intelligence? How do we act collaboratively to where just the information I've learned today, how do I use that information with others to actually advance something that's useful for all of us? And then the other one, which I ask almost every day in my own personal practice, especially looking at what we're experiencing in the world, is, well, how, man, what is my appropriate response when I'm dealing with all this? And how do I work with others to create an appropriate response? So I'm going to focus on, there's so much to talk about, but I'm going to focus on something fairly specific in terms of a project we're working on here in central Montana. And I'm actually going to propose some actions that coming out of the chute of this first meeting for you delegates to, you know, just, I'm going to throw out something here that I hope can be tested. And this is the project we've been working on over the last 4 or 5 years. It's called the Rangeland Monitoring Group Project. And it arose out of a few of us, you know, just getting a few people together and asking the question, is our landscape healthy? And what does healthy look like? And how would we know if it's getting more healthy or less healthy? And it's all kind of amazing to me, all of us who are doing some great conservation work can't really answer that question. Or at least we can't answer in a way that the public would trust that our answer is believable. And so at the heart of that, of course, is how do we monitor? You know, how do we track indicators on the landscape and also in our own community interactions to be able to track that something we determine is important is actually improving. So actually, this has been a very sort of slow, patient process, but over the last 3 or 4 years, a circle of people have continued to keep coming into this conversation about, well, how do we do community landscape monitoring? Our ranch has been doing monitoring for 20 years, and we can observe, you know, important positive changes that we can respond to and continue to make improvements, hopefully. But again, you know, I don't own my life. My actions are important, but I don't really own much. And because I'm so dependent on other people, our ranch is remarkably dependent on so many partners that to think that I'm responsible for much is a bit of a delusion. So this idea of bringing people together to kind of look, well, how do we know our communities actually, our community landscape as well as our community is actually improving? So over the last 4 years, and we kind of took a lesson from Point Blue Conservation Science initially, and we've obviously been working with the Bird Conservancy, is, a number of years ago, they came up with this range monitoring network where they looked at 3 indicators: soil, plants, and birds, as a way to assess trend lines in terms of the health of an individual ranch. And I was quite intrigued with that because we were trying to figure out how we might do that. What indicators would you look like? So we spent a lot of time visiting with those folks. Of course, we didn't have the resources Point Blue had. They have like 140 scientists, or even, Tammy, your crew. I mean, you guys have I'm always amazed how many staff exist in these groups. And, but the idea was how to take this individual monitoring and create a platform where a number of ranchers in a community, working with agencies, working with nonprofits, could share that accumulated data that's being gathered in multiple places, and then have some way of capturing that data and creating a template so we could all look at it together and say, well, what the hell's going on? I mean, if I look at the last 4 years in our particular grassland, we had a drought in 2017. The next year we had this explosion of Japanese brome that no one knew where in the hell it came from, even though it had been here for years. Then we had this huge outbreak of sweet clover that actually in some places killed sagebrush because it absorbed so much moisture. And then this year we have a huge hopper outbreak. We're living in these extremely variable landscapes, and how do we respond in a way that we can become more resilient and more adaptive? And I think the way you do that is through collaboration, which is exactly what we're trying to do with this project that Tammy and others have been putting together. So in this rangeland monitoring group process, so we have been working on these indicators of who can measure the soil quality, who can measure plants, who can measure the birds. So we're working with a number of partners, and Bird Conservancy is one, but our core thing on birds has been working with Partners for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Marissa Sather is kind of the point person up north of the Missouri River. And we've actually gotten ranchers who weren't that familiar with birds, in our area to kind of be willing to allow people to come and to monitor the birds and to begin to appreciate that sharing that information and actually seeing how those birds are doing would be a way for them to create actually their understanding of their place, but also a way to communicate to others how their management is actually dealing with these important species. And what's been very surprising is, well, I don't know, it wasn't surprising to me, but a lot of people who always get kind of freaked out about working with landowners, and because, they, all this kind of tension that sometimes occurs with environmentalists and things like that. These landowners got quite engaged in learning some of these birds that they've been around for their whole life and didn't really know about them. So now, you're getting these friendships between people who are coming on the land, that are doing the monitoring. And it's just interesting. We're probably up to about 20 survey sites in our particular area, and we're trying to integrate those with what Bird Conservancy is doing. But the point I'm trying to share here is that how do we create a community monitoring process that's respectful, that's transparent, that actually creates some really functional data and engages landowners in the context of what the heck is really going on here and why they need to be involved, and what role can they really play in understanding this context and actually be a player. And we're just about to launch this thing, and we're operating on almost $0, but we've gotten some people at MSU, Montana State, in that area to start building some kind of data templates. So those of us who have soil data, that have plant data, that have bird data, and we're looking at remote sensing, how can we aggregate that in a way that can be shared amongst a group of us and begin drawing some ideas of what's happening on the landscape and begin to draw in some trend lines. So we have one network we've just about to get established here in Musselshell and Petroleum in Garfield County in the central part of the state. But we have 3 or 4 other communities in Montana that are intrigued with this process. And if we can figure out the template of how to do this and how to share the data and how to deal with landowners being concerned about sharing data, this thing could expand. And I've shared with Tammy and others that, if we're going to if we are going to protect and save this vast grassland, we're going to have to create a vast network of people who are interconnected, sharing information in an honest, exploratory way, so that we can leverage more quickly what the hell's going on and what we can do with actions in our own places to kind of advance our particular geography. Now, where I think we have a problem, this is my proposal. It's like, so NRCS, and I don't know if Matt is still with us. You know, NRCS, I mean, they're the big player in the field. I mean, they're the big capital player that's providing a lot of dollars for conservation. And I've been involved and engaged with our NRCS folks from the get-go. And I've always been respectfully but somewhat critical that they really don't do any serious monitoring. They don't really, I mean, a lot of conservation is occurring because a lot of money is being spent. That doesn't necessarily compute to doesn't always compute that there's a lot of great conservation going on the ground. So an example of what recently happened is, so actually bird conserving, you know, had planted a wonderful lady up in the county in central Montana who helped us do monitoring, but it was almost impossible to get her to leave her day job of being a partner with NRCS working on kind of the eco projects. It just spent like 2 or 3 days monitoring birds. It's like, why can't NRCS, you know, put that into their work plan, that in the month of June, can these people just work a few days to monitor so we can actually see if we're making some progress on the land? And so my proposal here, and you know, I apologize if I may be scattered here, is that just imagine, because Point Blue does this, I know, and Bird Conservancy is doing this too, and Pheasants Forever is doing it. They are embedding staff in the NRCS. But what if we could really expand this, that we'd have multiple offices of NRCS that actually put into their work plan that they would have people who would be doing monitoring. And yes, we would be doing that struggle of what we should be monitoring, what are the indicators we can agree to, but that is really important work to do. And like, you know, we've been working with World Wildlife Fund on trying to agree on what those core indicators that would be appreciated or accepted across a number of different agencies and NGOs and landowners. But just imagine if you have that infrastructure already in place, and if we actually made this an important part of this whole program, it's like, how do we create monitoring over this large landscape in a way that's really functional and allows effective networking and shared data amongst us? And to me, it just seems like it wouldn't be a huge leap to do that. And we are beginning to have discussions. In fact, we have one this August with our state people about, you know, how can we actually advance this? So, you know, there's so much I'd like to share, but I just think if we're going to save grasslands, we got to know what the heck's going on, and we have to monitor. But monitoring in and of itself, I think, is useless if it's not tied to a dialogue. If it's not tied to a collaborative dialogue where different people with different perspectives are looking at this information and having some kind of discussion, even argument or debate about what that data is telling us. That kind of interaction of diversity with real data on a process that we all agree on, I think could really advance our understanding of our place and of the places of others. And again, back to this issue of shared intelligence, which is not my term, it's Peter Donovan, who works with us, who put together this nonprofit called the Soil Carbon Coalition, who we're working with on soils. Is like, he's a holistic practitioner, and he just makes this case that, you know, if we're going to get through so many of these issues, we somehow have to leverage our shared experience, our shared wisdom, our shared effort in a much more useful way than we're doing today. And so my offering to this effort in the last 2+ hours is, how can we, coming out of this, create a program of an expanded, agreed monitoring process that's also tied to a dialogue and a way to share the data, so that I can really plug into Miles in Canada, or Alejandro, or Monica over in Dakotas, and really understand what they're dealing with and what's happening in their landscapes, and how do we share amongst ourselves what actions we're taking, and what's the cause and effect of those, and what's the results of those. And when we're doing stupid things, how do we change? When we're doing good things, how do we advance those. So Matt, I probably talked too much, but I could talk for quite a bit on this subject. I've always been amazed why ranchers have been so resistant to monitoring. Well, I do know they're scared. They think monitoring is gonna get somehow it's gonna come back and bite them. And I think if I was to name one resource our ranch needs to cultivate and wants to enhance, it's public trust. That is a fundamental activity we do at our ranch and working with partners is how do we increase public trust so the public actually appreciates that what we're doing on this land is not only good for us, it's good for them, it's good for wildlife, it's good for plants. And if they can look at our whole community and say, I trust those guys out there in central Montana, how do we help those guys, be successful in a really difficult economic environment? So I'll stop there because I'm just kind of going off. But thanks. This is great.
Bill, that was wonderful. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And such a great example from your talk and Monica's and Alejandro's and Miles about what's happening on the ground, but these ways to elevate it up to a scale that I can already see going into the roadmap in some different ways. And so I hope folks are getting a sense of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're after with these speaker sessions. We got to hear directly from the land today. And next Thursday, we're going to be hearing more from other sectors that are working out on the land and some leaders in those sectors. And we'll hear some more perspectives from the different countries we're working with. And then on July 23rd, we'll hear from our last set of speakers. And if you need to follow along, I posted our web address in the chat, but this is pretty key to just stay aboard on the website. If you ever need kind of the up-to-date information, like today we posted this banner so you could get right onto YouTube if the Zoom links weren't working or something got lost. Our agenda is over here that you can follow along with some of the progress and who's going to be up in the next few days, and just a reminder about dates. We're trying to send out calendar invites with live information as it becomes available. But please always feel that you can return back to this calendar and see what's going on. And we're updating that as much as possible. And then to know where we're going with the roadmap, again, all of these speakers are helping give delegates new ideas or things that they've thought about before, but we may now have an opportunity to have these shared dialogues in the way that Bill was presenting and talking about as well. And we will start to fill out the roadmap when we get to July 28th. Thinking about priorities that could go here under these current potential solutions. Folks have been working on the vision through the survey. That's going to give us some common ground and direction about where we're headed. And so over time, over these work groups that we'll do informed by these speakers, we'll have an opportunity to fill this in and get a sense of where we're headed and how we know that we're getting there. So with that, Tammy, I don't know if you want to add anything at this point. And someone did, that's a good question. Someone just posted in the chat. I will say YouTube is open as a backup for delegates who are not able to access Zoom. But these speaker sessions, a lot of other people and leaders, colleagues of delegates also kind of wanted to see what was going on. And that is a public channel. And it's a great place for other people to get filled in about what we're doing. Obviously, this work involves and is going to include a lot more people than could attend as delegates during those work groups. But that doesn't mean this great information, amazing insights that we heard from so many great speakers and leaders today couldn't be helpful to a wider audience. So there's other people who want to tune in just to share. My dad was watching and checking it out and follow along. He's a conservationist from California, was really intrigued by this work. So it's open for people to see, and I think these ideas need to get out there, and that's part of the idea of the summit as well. Tammy, Arvind, any of the other panelists, lead panelists want to share anything before we wrap up?
Again, I just wanted to thank the panelists for the wonderful expertise and the voice that you provided and the guidance that you're helping us build this roadmap from. And I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and I look forward to everyone next week joining us. And just a reminder to send questions and answers so we can forward those to Chief Lord. We can bring those into the conversation as we move forward. And take care, everyone.
Yeah, so the agenda page, we will update with all the resources, the video from today, and any questions that were submitted or that are submitted over time. So look for that, and then we'll be sending out the email with information for next week's session and any other updates either tomorrow or Monday. And otherwise, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you all the delegates. Thank you again to the panelists. We really appreciate your time today. Take care out there.